Welcome to Beanstalk Mums podcast. Here at Beanstalk Mums, we believe that every mum is a powerhouse of potential and strength. Our mission is to uplift, empower and support single mums on their incredible journey. Each episode is packed with inspiring stories, practical advice and expert insights tailored to help you tackle the unique challenges and triumphs of single motherhood. Together we can turn every challenge into an opportunity and every moment into a stepping stone towards a brighter future. Welcome to Beanstalk Mums, where your story is our inspiration. Today we're exploring a living arrangement that many single mums may not even think to consider, and even fewer talk openly about. Choosing to stay under the same roof as an ex-partner for the sake of raising their child. It is a situation that comes with unique challenges, surprising benefits, and a whole lot of navigating boundaries. So joining me today is Heather, a single mum who made the bold decision to co-parent under the same roof with her ex. And she's here to share her experience, the ups and the downs and, well, everything in between. We'll talk about what led to this choice, how they made it work, and whether she'd recommend it to any other single mum. So whether you're in a similar situation, thinking about it, or just curious about how it all plays out, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. Let's dive in. Welcome, Heather. It's
Hi.
a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, look, it's amazing. I'm really glad that we could tee up this time together and you could come on and share a bit about your life with the community of single mums that we broadcast to.
I'm happy to be here and I hope somebody finds it helpful. It's certainly something that I navigated with not a lot of points of reference. I didn't have a lot of friends who had done it before, at least from an active, like people who had made the active decision to do it. So yeah, sort of fumbled through a bit of it, found a couple of different people online who had done it, who made it seem like it was a choice that we could live with. But yeah, no, hopefully somebody finds it useful and helpful.
Living with an ex after separating isn't quite the usual path.
No. People who do it because they don't have another choice. That's been my experience discussing with other people, whether they have kids or not. Like, I know people who have gone through breakups who have lived with their exes for an extensive period of time because they either own property together or they're on a lease together or some sort of like life circumstance required them to continue living with each other. And I guess that was what happened for us at the beginning.
You're saying that was your experience? That's how you ended up in this, or was it an
No. So we separated October 2021, and I think in a sense it was a bit of a COVID casualty.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a lot of people, like I know a lot of relationships that either thrived or broke down in COVID. But I think also our relationship had got to a point, we'd been together for almost 14 years. And it had really got to the point where we're great friends, but there wasn't a lot of intimacy left.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were sort of like doing this thing where we were sort of like friends who were raising kids together, but it didn't really feel like a relationship anymore. And, I think there's millennial children, a lot of our generation grew up with parents who stayed together for the kids. It was probably like the last generation who were divorced was big deal.
Yes.
Being separated was a big deal. Having single parents was a big deal. And we have 3 daughters. There was a point where I realized that I wasn't miserable, but I think we both deserved more and we both deserved to have the opportunity to have relationships
we
were fulfilled and happy and felt joy. And not to say that I didn't feel that with him, but our dynamic had definitely shifted from that of a married couple to more 2 friends who are raising kids together. And I think that's not necessarily a healthy, yes, it can be, and it was healthy for our kids. And I think there's a certain part of it that's very healthy for our kids to see that we are 2 friends
mm-hmm.
who effectively parent as a functional co-parenting unit. and there's not a lot of drama and there's not a lot of fighting or animosity between us. But it's also important that, you know, especially raising 3 daughters, to model healthy relationships for them. So them thinking that we're still married and like that's what a marriage is, and they don't see us being intimate or affectionate, that was also important to me. Like, it was really, there was a point where it just started to really bother me that I felt like I might have been doing that thing, like just staying married and staying in my marriage because that's what I was supposed to do.
Mm.
And breaking up the family was, you know, a bad thing. Yeah.
True. A lot of us, well, I think a lot of mums listening would be thinking, oh, I would love to bring up my children with a friend. But I also extremely understand what the side that you're coming from, in the sense that being in love with someone, that passion does fizzle down, and then eventually you're left with a very good camaraderie and, you know, a nice, but there is still that intimacy between you. When you lose that, there is a portion of you that does deserve, like you're saying, to be happy and to experience a relationship that brings you joy. And for many of us, that triggering point is when we look into our children, you know, how they are perceiving things, when it becomes more than just us, and we look at, you know, how do we educate them, what sort of example do we set, that perception shifts then for us, and we go, well, I want them to have a wonderful life, I want them to experience, I want them to have the joy and the passionate relationship and the you know, intimate relationship that lasts, and how are they going to have that if I don't model that for them? So completely understand.
I think also the flip side of that is that because both of us were doing this thing where we were sort of like shifting around each other, it got to a point where we both weren't happy at all. And if you're not happy in your relationship, it's really hard to have a good relationship with yourself as well. So I think more than anything, I want my kids to grow up feeling like they're complete people on their own, that they don't necessarily need to be in a relationship with somebody else. They don't need to have this one person that completes them. You know, like, they're not puzzles. They're not missing pieces. It's also okay to change your mind. And, you know, if you really try and you really give something a crack and you feel like it's not something that you want to do anymore, I also wanted them to know that a relationship doesn't have to burn down, or it doesn't have to be,
it doesn't have to explode before you walk away.
Exactly.
Besides wanting to be a good role model to your children, that the friendship was the reason why you ended up making that choice?
So when I decided that I was at the point where I didn't want to be married to him anymore, I was like, we have an opportunity right now to sort of like almost put some crime scene tape around our relationship and preserve all of the good stuff that we've got together.
I like that concept.
And for you know, the next chapter, it becomes about us raising our kids together as 2 separate people, unified from a co-parenting point of view. And obviously, you know, like, the decisions that we make in regards to parenting and our kids' well-being are decisions that we still make together, but choosing to move forward sort of like as 2 independent single people who have lives outside of each other, and we're not romantically or intimately involved anymore. We had been, you know, we'd been through COVID. We were already sleeping in separate bedrooms. We'd been sleeping in separate bedrooms for, I mean, I can't even remember how long it was. And at this point, I mean, October 2021, our youngest daughter had just turned 3. And our eldest was 7. We didn't even tell them for over a year that we were separated. They didn't notice. And if anything, after we decided to separate, things got better between us, which was wild.
Because you would have removed that pressure, you know, the pressure to be something that neither of you wanted to be.
Yes, I mean, I think that was something that I found very surprising. If anything, the downside of that is living with someone who you're separated from for an extended period of time also means there are things that you don't process or deal with when you do move out.
Mm-hmm.
So we separated our household this last August. So we lived together for 3.5 years after we separated before we moved out. And I think aside from the fact that moving is the worst and moving with kids
is it worse still?
there are very few things that are worse from sort of like a stress point of view. And I think out of the whole time that we'd been separated, like the moving part of things was the worst because it is the worst. But, you know, there are things that you don't necessarily deal with when you're still living together. There is still a level of comfort that you have when you come home and there's somebody there, even if you're not with that person. There is we're not together, but
there's still someone in the house.
We're both still there, parenting our kids together, and there's that support. Emotionally, right? We were still, you know, very supportive of one another. And like I said, we're great mates and we talk, you know, about most parts of our lives still. So like having that person there for an extended period of time, I guess there are things that you kind of might avoid talking about or feeling or processing. And there was a lot of delayed grief that I felt, especially when we moved out of the house in August. We're now in a situation where our kids live full time in a house and I nest in and out of the house, which is a whole different kettle of fish. I think if anything, if I was going to compare the two, I find nesting infinitely more difficult than being separated under one roof.
Let's take this back a little bit because so many points that you've touched upon that I want to go, I want to know more about this and more about this. So you mentioned like the emotional that you didn't get a chance to grieve. So how did you balance moving on emotionally while still being together? Like, how did you find ways to prioritize your own growth? And what about dating? Like, did you even, is that even possible in that situation?
It is. I think probably because I was the one who ended the marriage, I found it, I mean, not easier to move on, but I started dating before he did. That said, I didn't start dating until 2 years ago. So I spent 18 months. I mean, I also had a small business. I also had 3 little kids. I also wasn't even really that interested in dating, but I also had an ADHD diagnosis that I was working through and also like wanted to go to therapy. I wanted to work through stuff that I probably needed to do before I ended my marriage, but like I wanted to start dating from a place where I was ready and I didn't want to like just jump on the apps and, you know,
no, of course not.
that. But also like when you've got kids and you work, there's very little time. Prioritize other things. I really prioritize my friendships and really strengthening those and making sure that I had a village and my kids had a village. So that was something that I prioritized over dating. So when I did start dating, I had to make you have to make very specific choices, right? And when you're living with someone, so the ground rules, and I don't even think we had a conversation about it, but it was like, the house is off limits. Neither of us are going to bring people to the house. And that rule still stands. You know, like I don't have my kids, like I don't bring people around my kids. He doesn't bring people around our kids. So it's like, that's a scheduling thing. But when we were living together, they like it was never on the cards that either of us would bring people home or bring people around.
That emotional space though, like you were saying, you didn't properly grieve till you moved out. So, and then, you know, having therapy, which is absolutely quite normal and very healthy to do.
Yeah.
How did you achieve that whilst together in the same house?
I think probably because we'd gone through an extended period where we probably could have done it a few years earlier with the same result. Like, I think we'd both.
You were well and truly finished, and it was
Yeah,
just.
yeah. I mean, like I can't speak fully to his experience, but we've talked, like we've spoken about it, and I think we both, fully admit that we're a lot happier now than we were in the last 2 years of our marriage when we were a couple. Like even when neither of us are dating somebody or in another relationship, I think we're both a lot better adjusted, and we're, kinder to each other, and we're kind of parents and kind of people across the board now. I think there was, especially the last 6 months, were especially difficult for me because I knew what was coming. I did, but I didn't see a way out of it. And I think I didn't realize that co-parenting under one roof was even a thing that people did.
That could be possible.
Because our kids were really little. They were 3, 5, and 6, I think. Still very young, which is why we decided that we weren't going to tell them. We were just going to, figure out what we were going to do through our own stuff and come up with a plan first before we told them that this was changing for them. Even though we didn't tell them for well over a year, like almost 18 months after we separated. I think also the grief that I've had since moving out has been more around being so used to having somebody around all the time, this person. Even though we weren't together anymore, I was used to seeing him every day, and I was used to seeing my kids every day.
That makes sense.
And anybody who's been through a marriage breakup with kids can relate to the experience of feeling lonely in a house full of people.
Absolutely.
Which is a very different experience to feeling lonely and actually being alone.
It's very, very true.
I think that's probably the biggest thing for me, because this is, like I haven't lived alone since my mid-20s, and I'm 41 now. I had roommates, and then I moved in with Greg. Like, I'd always lived with people, and then I'm used to living with my little people. I've been going from that to living alone half the time.
It does certainly take a lot to get used to that, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I think that's probably like the biggest, the most complex grief that I have felt. And also, like you tend to maybe ignore stuff when you're still living together. So like we still, and we still do this as well, we still go out and do stuff as a family, and that whole sort of like, oh, we're not together, but we are still living in the same house. So like, oh, we'll go and do grocery shopping together, or we'll go and we'll do this. And both of us having that parallel parenting experience, but we're still doing it together.
That is just so surreal.
Yeah.
What about those, inevitable moments where there would have been disagreements or maybe tension? Like, how did you handle those?
Better than we used to when we were married.
Okay. Wow, so that buffer, the actual taking that label off. Wow.
Yeah, I think we both had a lot more compassion and grace for each other now. I think because that tension, that thing that was really the reason our marriage ended, not being a factor anymore, and our focus being on the kids, that's what we come back to. And I think now that we're both in places where we're a lot happier as people and in our own lives, I think that from a conflict resolution point of view, I've found personally really helpful. I feel like he listens to me a lot more now than did when we were married. Yeah. And like he's where I think we're both really willing to listen to how we each feel about different decisions and different sort of ways we navigate being parents. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly sounds like that's a definite win-win for the both of you. It's lovely to hear that your relationship has, well, it really has grown. It has actually grown. It's evolved into something else. Yeah. And you talk about your children, I want to say keeping it from them, but that's almost sounds wrong. Not making them privy to the fact they're separated.
Yeah.
Did you find that did that help, and spending that time together under the same roof? Do you think that actually benefited your child?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I mean, look, when we sat the kids down finally to talk to them about it, at that point, our youngest was 4 and the big girls were 7 and 8. The big girls were both very upset to begin with. They did this thing and I watched it happen. They both they started crying, but then they stopped when I said, Mummy and Daddy aren't going to be a couple anymore. We're not going to be married anymore, but we're still going to be a family. Nothing's changing. It just means that sometimes you'll do things with Daddy and sometimes you'll do things with Mummy and sometimes we'll all do things together. But for the moment, nothing is changing and we're all still going to live in this house. And the reason we told them was because he was taking them overseas to visit his parents for a month. And we thought that was a great opportunity. It was going to be like the first family holiday that they had been on without both of us being there.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to sort of and they were 18 months older than they were when we ended our marriage.
That makes a big difference, doesn't it, at that age?
They had no clue. And I said to them, do you know we haven't been a couple since last year? And the big girls looked at us and they were like, what do you mean? They just thought that this was what it was. I'm like, nothing is going to change. Literally nothing is going to change apart from the fact that at some point in the future, we won't be living in the same house anymore. And then we got 2 questions. One was from our eldest who asked if that meant that they were going to get to have 2 bedrooms and 2 Christmases. And from our youngest who wanted to know if she would still get to go to swimming lessons. They were the only questions that they had.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they're children, so their world revolves around them. And for them, that was obviously the most important events that potentially would suffer. And they don't have the reasoning. So overall, it sounds like this is a dream separation, really, listening to describe it, because your children have had continuity and stability.
Mm-hmm.
They've had 2 people that relate to it. I wish this to everyone that's separating. Unfortunately, there are many mums listening going, oh my God, this is just, it sounds like a fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not gonna. It was not without its pain. It was not without weeks where we just hated each other. I'm not trying to put rose-tinted shades on any of this, but I mean, and obviously, I also want to recognize the massive privilege that I had to be able to do this, because there are a lot of parents who their situation, this would never be an option for them.
No.
This would never be an option for a separation or a divorce that is because of domestic violence. Absolutely. Or an unsafe environment. I do feel incredibly privileged and lucky to have been able to have this time with him and with our kid to sort of plan and figure out how we were going to do things and be able to talk about it and think about what it might look like versus having to make a bunch of decisions really quickly. And I'm incredibly grateful to him that it was something that he was willing to do as well, because I think at the end of the day, it will hopefully benefit our kids a lot. And I think it definitely benefited us from a co-parenting perspective.
I'm no child psychologist, but I think 100%.
Yeah.
100%. They always do say it's that stability that carries through.
Yeah.
I'm sure people are going to have plenty of opinions listening to this and think thoughts about arrangements like this.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how did your family and friends react? Did you have support, or did you have to deal with judgment?
Everyone always has an opinion. And one thing that I learned when I first became a parent is that when you're a parent, everybody's going to give you their opinion. People on the street are going to get, people in the checkout line, they're all going to tell you.
And it's all going to be contradictory.
Right? So I learned very quickly that there were people whose voice and whose opinion I trusted,
Mm-hmm.
and there were other people whose voice and opinions I was just going to put straight in the bin.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there were people who sort of like made me think about things. Whether or not I agreed with their opinion, I respected and appreciated the time that they took to sort of like even think about what we were doing. I think one of the most surprising things that came up a couple of times that I struggled with the most was, if you guys are still living together, if you can still stomach living together, why aren't you just together? Why aren't you just working on this? And I'm like,
And
but
that
I've been
touches
working on
back
it.
to that last
Yeah,
generation
so like
that
it
you're
mustn't
talking
be
about.
that bad if you can still live together. I'm
Yes.
like, but why should we have to live
Yes.
together until we hate each other
Yes.
and then have to go through a divorce? Like, why can't we? I don't know if you've seen the TV series The Split,
No.
but it if there is any TV recommendation I can give someone going through a breakup or a divorce, it is to watch this series, because it's about a family of female divorce lawyers, London. There's this whole concept throughout the whole series called the good divorce, right? Yeah. So like the goal is that you are able to get to the end of your divorce and still, I mean, you might not necessarily love this person anymore. I can say that I still love him. My love for him has changed.
Mm-hmm.
I love him as the father of my children. I love him as a friend. I'm not in love with him anymore, but there is still love there. And I think that hearing that over and over again, like, oh, like you're just giving up, like sort of, and I think also as somebody who is neurodivergent and has a rejection sensitivity and also takes things very personally, especially criticism.
Yes.
I'm like, but I have been trying and it's not working. And I'm at the point where I'm like, I would like to see what my life is like outside of this marriage. And I don't think I should have to blow my relationship up in order to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there were other people who were really kind of supportive. I think the other surprising thing was, like, when I moved out in August, there were people who follow me on Instagram who had no idea that Greg and I had been separated for 3.5 years. They're like, what do you mean? Who is this guy you're dating? What's happening? I don't understand what's happening. But that's how sort of like amicable and low key we kept it, especially like on social media.
Absolutely.
For the most part, I think we've had more negative opinions about the nesting arrangement than we did about co-parenting under one roof.
So are you now in a nesting arrangement?
Yeah.
So you've got your children in, just for those that don't know, nesting arrangements when you've got children in one home and then you come into it in the other.
Yes.
Wow. And why are you finding this one harder?
I think because, I mean, it's the first time I've lived by myself.
I see.
For most of my adult life. And
it's more from like a personal, emotional point of view, not so much the parenting and the relationship with him. It's just
But also, I think there are little things like our work situations are very different. I have a job where I have to be at work very early, so he does all of the school drop-offs.
Mm-hmm.
I pick them up 3 days a week, take them home, dinner, bath, bedtime, sleep over. And then the original arrangement was that we were going to switch off weekends, but I see them most weekends. Like, we're, in a sense, sometimes we still are co-parenting under one roof. Like, I'll go over to the house and I'll sleep at the house all weekend. We did that over Christmas and New Year's. I was there for most of that time and sort of fell back into that co-parenting under one roof kind of thing. And I think I feel really grateful that I have a relationship with him where I can go over to the house anytime I want. I think he would probably want me to be there more, given half a chance. And not from like romantic point of view or like a relationship point of view, but like I do see my kids less now that we live apart.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets a lot of that. Like, I think he gets a lot of those. I mean, granted, he also gets all of the shit of getting 3 kids ready for school in the morning. That sucks. Do I miss that? Would anybody miss that? I mean, so like he's a saint for doing that. He's also very good at it.
Mm.
He also really enjoys it. And I think a grief point for me is like missing out on, you know, those little things that happen, the little
The special moments amongst the chaos.
yeah, like the teeth falling out. Sometimes I'm there for that and sometimes I'm not. Our 9-year-old lost a tooth yesterday and I found out about it on a text message, which is fine. It's going to happen because there will be a point where something happens and he gets a text message about it and, you know, like he'll miss out on that. So it's not like it's a one-way thing.
It's an interesting way to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's lovely. It's great that you guys have been able to create such an amazing environment for your children. Just as I'm mindfully watching, the time is drawing for us, and I'm just curious for any single mums who might be in similar situation or considering this path, have you got any words of wisdom, or is there anything that you would have wished to have known before starting this journey?
I think it's like any relationship, communication will be the life or death of it. I think from a logistical point of view, one of the things we did fairly early on, not so much when, I mean, we did it when I was working in my own small business. We would have we had a shared family calendar just so we could keep track of like all of the kid stuff. But then especially when I started dating and then when we separated our households, we have like a shared Google calendar and anything that's super important goes in there. Recurring stuff, you know, like the days that I pick the kids up from after school care, the weekends that I have, the weekends that I'm away, or, you know, he has work commitments. Having really clear communication and expectations from a logistics point of view is really important, but also being able to have a conversation about logistics or planning things and removing emotion from it. I think that's really important. We've had to do a lot. I think he's been very, very accommodating with me and my work schedule, but also when I was in a relationship with someone asking if I could like swap days or school holidays. I'm not really able to work from home these last holidays. I did. That's an entire podcast episode in and of itself.
Might have to have you back about that one.
Oh God, no, it would just be swearing. It would all be swearing and therapy. Wine. But being able, like, and I think it's also really important to center your conversations and your communication around what your common goal is, which is your kids. And if there's personal stuff that's coming up, especially if there's stuff that, you know, one of you is feeling about your relationship or somebody's upset about something, being able to either step away from that and have a specific conversation around, you know, like this is what we're doing with the kids these days, and then parking the rest of that stuff for another time. I think getting to a place where you can do that is really important.
That's the whole thing that keeps the word that keeps screaming at me is emotion, and that emotional regulation, removing the emotion. That would have been probably the most trickiest part, or it may be most trickiest part for many mums out there. So being able to just to go, well, no, almost treating like a business transaction, I'm presuming, you know, like
little bit. But I mean, I'm also really lucky in that he's a very active dad. Like and I know a lot of women who don't have husbands or ex-husbands who are as active and engaged as he is. So that's probably one of the reasons why it worked so well for so long, is because he is so active and engaged and picks up a lot of the load. This kind of thing, like, I guarantee you there are people who are listening to this podcast who are in worse marriages than I was, and they will just stay in those marriages because they can't see a way out of it. And I think probably the last year that we were living together was one of the healthiest years of our entire relationship, because we admitted to each other that, you know, this isn't really working for us anymore. So, like, how do we both build a life ourselves and together in a sense, but not together? I think that's something that's possible. It really is possible to do that. And your kids are so resilient. Kids just, you know, they want to know that they're going to get to go to swimming lessons. You know, they might get really excited about having 2 Christmases.
Absolutely.
You know, you don't have to sacrifice your own needs just to stay in something because you think that's what you're supposed to do based on whatever.
I love it.
So conditioning that.
Absolutely. I love that last phrase that you just said. You know, it's being able to take out that big lesson out of what you've just described, that do not stay, and potentially the advice being, you know, do not stay somewhere where things are just going to keep bringing you down and destroying what mental capacity you have, and emotional capacity, and your children's as well. Cut it when it needs to be cut, and then let yourself be free. And
I mean, and it's terrifying. It is a terrifying decision to make.
Absolutely. And I'm not advocating for everyone to suddenly run away and have a divorce or separate from their partners if they're not.
No.
But yes, being able to recognize that point and being adults about it and chat and saying, okay, where do you see our future so that it is the most healthiest for everyone?
Yeah. I mean, and I think a lot of people, the struggle that they have is, you know, the sunk cost fallacy. You know, like, I've invested X amount of years and love and all of this stuff into it. What if I leave it?
But it doesn't get lost, does it? Just because, I mean, you've invested it. That's been invested.
That's the thing, right?
It doesn't get lost.
But it becomes a poker machine. That's no longer an investment. That's a gamble.
Yes.
You're like, once you realize that it's probably not going to get better, but this is something that might make it better. Like, it's certainly not going to make it worse. Like, if you look at it, you're like, okay, well, it's probably not going to get worse if I leave, but it might get a lot worse if I stay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's
absolutely.
These are the things that the conversations that you don't have before you have kids or as you're growing up, or like, this is the things that, you know, people don't talk about. So when it happens to you, you're like, am I the first person that's gone through this? No,
hardly. I think it's becoming more the norm, and maybe potentially it is because society is shifting and separation and divorce is more prevalent, and people are choosing to separate and live a healthier life than you know, staying and suffering. That potentially maybe, you know, our children's generations will be discussing this, maybe not on the first date, but you know,
look at women, especially in their 20s these days. They're like, I don't want to have kids. I don't need to get married. I don't need to be locked down to one person. I am a complete person on my own. I like anybody that I bring into my life. And this is how I date now, by the way. Like, I'm not looking for somebody to complete me. I am good. If we're dating, you need to bring something to my life. And it better be, it needs to be good, or you're gone.
Well, you've got 3 beautiful souls there that fill up your time enough.
Exactly.
You don't need another child to worry about.
I mean, no, I can't have any more. I had a hysterectomy when I was 40.
Oh, I meant as in a male adult child.
Yeah, 100%. Also that, on the apps, you know, like, probably 50% of the guys who like me are like early or mid-20s. And I'm like, I have enough children. That said, you know, like, some 40-year-old men are also children. So, like,
yes. Yeah,
no, thank you. I have enough. I'm done.
Well, on that note,
yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with any single mums that might be sort of on the fence, or just any parting words? I'm really blessed that you've spent this time with us, and I'm really, really happy to have had this opportunity to delve into your world.
Anytime.
It's so surreal and amazing.
I think it's so important that you talk to people about things. Like, I would never have been able to make the decision that I made without 3 very specific close girlfriends of mine who I talk to them probably every day, either on text or on the phone or on FaceTime every day for maybe 6 months before I actually had the conversation with him. But there was just this one day where, like, I don't even remember what I said to my friend April, but all she wrote back was, babe, it's time. You've tried, you've done this. Like,
time to let go.
Time.
Yeah.
and making sure that you do have a support system to help you through the thing that's coming. Because regardless of whether it's amicable or not, it's really, really hard. It's really hard. And the thing that you do, actually, there is two more things. There's one more thing after this that I will say. Having that support system is so important, and it needs to be people who are outside of, they need to be your people. They can't be mutual friends, because the mutual friends, I don't care how amicable it is, they pick sides.
Yeah.
So you need to have your people to talk to. And I'm not saying that they even need to be people that you know in real life. I like some of my closest friends in the world I've never met. They live in my phone. And I think that's something that's very common now. But it's so important to have that support system.
Yeah, that tribe to hold you.
Yeah, that's really important. And now I can't remember the second thing.
Oh no.
I know.
It's important because I saw this light bulb light over your head, and I'll add it in.
I'm looking at the time, and I had to go and get my kids.
All right. Well, thank you so very much. I really am grateful that you let me into your world.
Honestly, anytime.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us today for another uplifting and guiding chat with one of our guests. For all the links mentioned in this episode, please see the show notes or visit the full episode write-up on beanstalkmums.com.au. If you enjoy this podcast, please follow us and leave us up to a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple. That's a terrific way to support us, absolutely cost-free. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for upcoming guests or topics that you'd like us to cover on the next episode, please leave us a comment here or head over to our webpage, beanstalkmums.com.au/topics/podcast, and leave us a voicemail there on a very cute little widget. If you are not already following us on social media, we are Beanstalk Mums on all platforms like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok and Pinterest. And on all of those platforms, we explore the ups and downs of being a single mum in today's world. We uplift and support you on your journey, providing you with a community of your own through the Single Mum Vine on Facebook. And of course, our website holds an extensive library of articles written by single mums for single mums on topics that make our life happier, easier and healthier. If you haven't yet subscribed to our Beanstalk newsletter, that's a great free way of connecting with us fortnightly. The newsletter includes podcast summaries, newest articles published that month, spotlights on specific businesses that we have vetted just for you, as well as little PDF gifts from worksheets, checklists, planners, journals, and any other tools that may help you to thrive in this single mum life. So just follow the link in the show notes to sign up. Thank you once again for joining me for this episode, and I look forward to chatting to you and bringing you our next guest the following month. Take care.